Why did my boyfriend want me to die? I was waiting for my boyfriend to walk me to his house from the bus stop when a scary teenage boy approached me. What type of phone is that? He asked with a grin. Just an iPhone. I looked around, but Julian wasn't there. The stop was only 10 minutes away from his apartment. 3 more guys appeared behind the first one, all wearing black hoodies in the middle of summer. Let me see it, the teenager said, stepping closer. I called Julian. I'm at the bus stop. Where are you? Oh, my bad. Give me a few minutes. That's when I heard it. Jessica, his girl best friend, giggling in the background. Hold on, he told me. Then to her, you're so short, oh my gosh. The teenager was maybe 3 feet away now. I could smell the devil's lettuce. I said, let me see the phone. Julian, I hissed, backing up against the bus stop pole. There's 4 guys here. They're surrounding me. Okay, I'm coming. Just 10 minutes. It's a 10-minute walk. You should already be here. We're in the middle of a game, he said, voice lower. I can't just leave. I heard beer pong balls bouncing, cheering, Jessica screaming, yes! Did you see that? The first teenager grabbed my wrist. Are you deaf? I just want to look at it. I yanked away, my heart pounding. Julian! They're touching me. You're being dramatic. It's just kids. They're probably like 16. Please, I begged, voice shaking now. I'm scared. Actually scared. Should you help her? I heard Jessica ask in the background. She sounds upset. She gets anxious, Julian said, not even covering the phone. Makes everything a bigger deal than it is. I tried dialing 911 while keeping Julian on speaker, but my hands were shaking too hard. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at Rosemont bus stop. 4 men are... Please hold. Classical music. Your estimated wait time is approximately 8 minutes. One of the teenagers knocked my phone. It hit the pavement, skittering away. I scrambled for it on my hands and knees, gravel cutting into my palms. I could still hear Julian on speaker. Jess, your turn. Show me that technique again. Julian! I screamed, grabbing the phone. The screen was cracked now. What now? They knocked my phone down. I need you now. Bloody hell, fine. I'll leave in 5 minutes. Happy? Did that bitch just yell at you? Jessica's voice carried clearly. That's so toxic. I know, right? See what I have to deal with? The teenagers were laughing now. One picked up my dropped purse, started going through it. Looks like boyfriend doesn't GAF about you, he said, pulling out my wallet. Julian, they have my purse. They're going through my stuff. So grab it back? I don't know what you want me to do from here. The 7-Eleven across the street still had lights on. I tried to move toward it, but 2 of them blocked my path. Where are you going? We're just talking. I'm trying to get to the store, I said into the phone. They won't let me leave. They won't let you leave? Julian repeated, skeptical. Come on. Your girl's paranoid, Jessica laughed. Is she always like this? Pretty much, Julian said. Watch this shot, though. One teenager pulled out a knife, just flicked it open, casual, started cleaning his nails with it. Nice phone. iPhone 14? My whole body went cold. He has a knife! Julian mocked me. Stop being so extra. Julian, please, I'm begging you. I said I'm coming. Fuck. Give me 10 minutes. You said that 20 minutes ago. Well, now you're making me start over. Why didn't you just take an Uber? You told me to take the bus. You said you'd be here. That's when I ran. I shoved through the gap between 2 of them and sprinted toward the 7-Eleven. They shouted behind me. One grabbed my hair, yanking me backward. I screamed. I bit the hand holding my hair. He let go, cursing. I grabbed my phone and kept running. The clerk immediately understood, motioned me behind the counter, reached for his phone. Julian, I sobbed into my cracked screen. I'm in the 7-Eleven. I had to run. One grabbed my hair. See? You're fine. I'll come with you, Jessica said, and even she sounded worried. 40 minutes later, he showed up, with Jessica. Both drunk, her wearing his hoodie, leaning into him laughing about something. I was almost attacked, I said. My knees were bleeding from falling. Hair tangled from being grabbed. Voice raw from screaming. You literally just said you're in 7-Eleven, Julian said. You're safe. What's the problem? 4 guys surrounded me. One had a knife. They went through my purse. Jessica's face went white. Oh my gosh, she whispered. Wait, you were actually... She pulled me into a hug. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was real. Julian's whole demeanor shifted. Yeah, babe, that's messed up. But only because Jessica said it first. Julian? Jessica pulled back from the hug, staring at him. She called you crying, begging for help. You were laughing too, Julian protested. Because I didn't know. Because you said she always exaggerates. Jessica stepped away from him. But you knew. You knew she was at that bus stop. You told her to take that bus. Jessica looked at me, then back at Julian, then at me again. She mouthed 3 words silently, and I felt my lips curl into a smile. Julian, can I show you something? She started walking towards the coffee. Saying yes was the worst decision he ever made. I'm still in the 7-Eleven 20 minutes after Julian and Jessica arrived, sitting on the floor behind the counter because my legs won't hold me up anymore. My knees are scraped raw from hitting the pavement. My scalp aches where that guy grabbed my hair, and I can see my hands shaking every time I try to touch my cracked phone screen. The clerk brought me a bottle of water and a paper towel for my knees, but I haven't opened either one yet. I'm just sitting here staring at the fluorescent lights overhead. listening to the hum of the refrigerators and the beeping of the register whenever someone checks out. My whole body feels heavy and weird, like I'm moving through water. Jessica pulls Julian over to the coffee station in the corner, saying she wants to show him something. And even though I can't hear them clearly, I watch her face shift from the drunk, giggly expression to something cold and focused. She's got her phone in her hand, positioned weird, like she's trying to be casual about recording, and Julian's nodding along, completely oblivious. He keeps glancing back at me with this annoyed expression, like I'm ruining his night by sitting here bleeding. Jessica leans in closer to him, says something that makes him shake his head, and I see her thumb move on her phone screen. I catch pieces of their conversation when Jessica raises her voice slightly, asking Julian to explain again why he thought I was overreacting, and he actually repeats the same shit about me being anxious and dramatic. His exact words carry across the store. Hearing those words again, this time while I'm sitting here bleeding and shaking, turns something inside me from panic into ice-cold anger that feels almost steadying. I stop shaking. My breathing evens out. I watch Julian gesture with his hands, explaining to Jessica why my fear was unreasonable, and something clicks into place in my brain. This is who he is. This is who he's always been. I just couldn't see it before. The clerk comes over and quietly tells me their security cameras caught me running into the store and part of the chase outside, and he's already saved the footage on a USB drive in case I want to file a police report. His kindness makes my eyes sting with tears I've been holding back, and I manage to thank him even though my voice comes out scratchy and weird. He pats my shoulder gently and goes back to the register. I hold the USB drive in my palm, feeling the weight of it. Proof, evidence, something concrete that shows I'm not making this up or being dramatic. 2 police officers finally show up about an hour after the clerk first called them, and they take a basic report while I sit in a plastic chair trying to describe 4 guys I barely saw in the dark. They're professional, but not particularly warm, warning me that without clear identification, or the guys still being in the area, the case will be difficult to pursue beyond the initial report. One officer writes everything down in a notebook. The other one keeps asking me to repeat details about what the teenagers were wearing, what they said, which direction they went. I answer everything as best I can, but my memory feels fuzzy around the edges. I remember the smell of weed, the knife blade, the hand in my hair, but their faces are just dark shapes in my mind. The officers take the USB drive from the clerk and give me a case number written on a business card. Outside the store afterward, Julian tries to downplay everything by saying he's glad I'm safe now and we should just go home, while Jessica stands a few feet away watching him with this expression I've never seen on her face before. It's like she's seeing him for the first time, really seeing him, and she doesn't like what she's looking at. I realize she's seeing him clearly for the first time, the same way I am, and there's something almost satisfying about not being alone in that recognition. Julian reaches for my arm and I pull away. He looks confused, hurt even, like I'm the one being unreasonable. I tell Julian I'm not going to his place and I'm not getting in a car with him right now. Then I ask the clerk if he can help me call a rideshare from inside the store. Julian protests, saying he can drive me, but I just keep repeating no until he finally stops talking, and Jessica doesn't argue with my decision at all. She just nods at me and mouths something that looks like good. The clerk helps me order a ride on his phone since mine is barely functional with the cracked screen. Julian and Jessica leave before my car arrives and I watch them walk to his car through the store window. She's not leaning on him anymore. She's walking several feet away, arms crossed. When I get home around midnight, I lock every lock on my door, and then spend an hour taking photos of my scraped knees, my torn pants, the bruise forming on my wrist, and the crack pattern on my phone screen. I write down everything I remember with timestamps, including exact quotes from Julian's call, because some part of me already knows I'm going to need this documentation later. I take pictures from multiple angles. I write down the names of the streets near the bus stop. I document the time I called Julian, the time he arrived, the time the police showed up. My hands are steadier now that I have a task to focus on. My phone buzzes with a text from Jessica sent just to me, not the group chat, saying she's sorry for laughing and she recorded Julian saying those things about me because she wants me to have proof of what he really thinks. She asks if I want the audio file, and I stare at the message for 10 minutes trying to figure out if I can trust her or if this is some kind of setup. Maybe she's trying to get me to say something she can show Julian later. Maybe she feels guilty and wants to help. Maybe both things are true at the same time. I text back yes, and she sends the file immediately. I block Julian's number around 2 a.m. because he keeps texting these weird messages that alternate between asking if I'm okay and saying I'm being really unfair right now, and I can't deal with that on top of everything else. Sleep doesn't come. Every time I close my eyes, I feel that hand in my hair yanking me backward, or I see the knife blade catching streetlight and my heart starts racing all over again. I lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound in my apartment building, jumping at footsteps in the hallway. The next morning, I wake up around 7 after maybe 2 hours of broken sleep, and the first thing I do is check my phone. My bank app has 2 red alert notifications and my stomach drops when I open them. 2 attempted charges at Murphy's Liquor, one for $43 at 9:47 p.m., and another for $68 at 9:52 p.m. Both declined because I'd already reported my card as lost when I got home. The store address is about 2 miles from the bus stop, and the timestamps land right in that window when those guys had my purse in their hands. Seeing the actual proof laid out like that makes my hands start shaking again because it confirms everything was real. Not just me being dramatic or anxious like Julian said. I screenshot both alerts and the declined transaction details. Then I open every banking app I have and start freezing cards one by one. Debit card frozen, credit card frozen. The backup card I barely use frozen. I forward both bank alerts to the police report email address they gave me last night, and type out a short message explaining that these charges happened right after the attack at the timestamps that match when my purse was stolen. Hitting send feels good in this weird practical way, like I'm building a case instead of just sitting here scared. I add the bank screenshots to a new folder on my phone labeled Evidence, and include the photos from last night of my scraped knees and the bruise on my wrist. Around 2 p.m., someone knocks on my apartment door, and I freeze completely until I hear Jessica's voice saying it's her. I look through the peephole and she's standing there holding 2 coffees and her phone, looking tired and serious instead of drunk and giggly. I almost don't open the door because I'm still processing everything, but something about her expression makes me unlock it. She walks in and sits down at my kitchen table without asking, setting down 1 coffee in front of the empty chair across from her. We sit there and she starts talking immediately, saying she believed Julian's whole story about me being anxious and making things bigger than they are, and she feels sick now knowing she was laughing while I was actually being attacked. She pulls out her phone and plays the recording she took at the coffee station last night, and I hear Julian's voice clearly saying, "I make everything a bigger deal than it is," and calling my fear extra. Hearing those exact words played back makes my stomach turn, and I have to look away from her phone screen. Jessica suggests we should put together a timeline of everything that happened, and I agree because doing something concrete feels better than just sitting with the nausea. We spend the next 2 hours building a document on her laptop that shows every call I made to Julian with the exact timestamps from my phone log. Then we add the quotes from her recording where he dismissed me. Then the bank alerts with their timestamps. Then descriptions of my injuries with the photos I took. Having it all laid out in order like that makes the pattern impossible to ignore, and I feel something shift inside me from hurt into this cold clarity about what actually happened. I find the business card Detective Larissa Turner left with my police report copy, and I call the number on it. It goes to voicemail, so I leave a detailed message explaining about the 2 bank fraud attempts at Murphy's Liquor, and asking about getting the security footage from the 7-Eleven. My voice sounds steadier than I expected when I listen back to make sure the message went through, almost businesslike. And I realize I'm starting to think about this whole thing as a case with evidence instead of just a scary thing that happened to me. I have to go to work that evening, and the entire shift I'm jumpy, flinching every time someone walks up behind me in the stockroom or when the door chime goes off. My coworker Brianna notices after I drop a box of inventory when she comes around the corner and asks if I'm okay. I give her the very short version, just that something scary happened last night and I'm still pretty shaken up, and she nods and doesn't push for details. Julian's texts start coming through on my laptop around 8 since I blocked his number on my phone, and they're this weird mix of apologies and blame. One says he's so sorry and he should have been there. The next one says I hung up on him and wouldn't let him help. I don't respond to any of them. Just take screenshots of every single message and add them to the evidence folder Jessica and I started earlier. Jessica texted me around 9 with a screenshot from a group chat with Julian, and some of his friends from last night where he literally wrote she's freaking out about some kids at the bus stop. I'm in the middle of a game, followed by 3 eye roll emojis. Seeing how he described my attack to his friends while I was chased and grabbed makes me so angry I have to put my phone down and walk to the bathroom to breathe for 5 minutes. Detective Turner calls me back the next morning while I'm eating breakfast and explains the whole process for subpoenaing the bank's transaction data and pulling security footage from nearby businesses. She sounds competent and matter-of-fact, treating this like an actual case instead of just some girl being dramatic about teenagers, and I feel this tiny spark of hope that someone with real authority is taking this seriously. My phone buzzes while I'm standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, and when I see it's a text from an unknown number, I almost ignore it until I read the preview. It's Ahmed from the 7-Eleven saying he already saved the security footage to a USB drive, and he's happy to give me his contact info for the police report. I have to lean against the shelf for a second because this guy who barely knows me took the time to save evidence without anyone asking him to, and he's offering to help with no strings attached. My eyes start burning and I'm crying in the middle of the store. Not sad crying, but this weird, grateful kind where I'm just overwhelmed that a stranger cared more about my safety than my own boyfriend did. I text him back thanking him and asking when I can pick up the USB, and he responds right away saying anytime, just come by the store. I add his number to my contacts under Ahmed 7-Eleven and screenshot our conversation for my evidence folder. That evening, I park my car in the lot behind my apartment building and walk toward the entrance with my keys already in my hand like I always do now. I hear footsteps behind me in the hallway, and my whole body just stops working. My heart starts hammering so hard I can feel it in my throat, and I'm frozen there holding my grocery bags, unable to move or breathe. The footsteps get closer, and I'm about to run when I see it's just Mrs. Wills from 3B getting her mail from the wall boxes. She smiles at me and says something about the weather, but I can barely hear her over the rushing sound in my ears. I manage to smile back and walk to my door, but once I'm inside with all the locks turned, I slide down to sit on the floor still shaking. My hands won't stop trembling, and I realize I can't keep living like this, jumping at every sound and freezing up in my own building. I need an actual plan, not just fear and avoidance. Jessica texts me around 9 asking if I'm okay, and I tell her about freezing in the hallway. She calls me right away instead of texting back and says she knows someone who might be able to help, a woman named Jillian North who works as an advocate at this community center connected to campus. Jessica says Jillian helped her friend last year with safety planning after a bad situation, and she thinks Jillian would be willing to meet with me. I save Jillian's number when Jessica sends it and stare at it for a while before I actually call the next morning. When Jillian answers, her voice is warm but professional. Like she does this kind of thing all the time, and she doesn't make me explain every detail before offering to meet up. She just asks if I'd be comfortable meeting at a coffee shop, and suggests a few times that work for her schedule. We settle on that afternoon at 3, and she tells me to bring any documentation I have, but not to stress if I don't have everything organized yet. I get to the coffee shop 15 minutes early because I'm anxious about being late, and I order a tea. I don't really want just to have something to do with my hands. Jillian shows up exactly on time wearing jeans and a cardigan, looking like someone's cool aunt instead of how I pictured an advocate would look. She sits down across from me and pulls out a notebook, then walks me through this whole safety planning process that feels way more concrete than I expected. We talk about changing up my regular routes so I'm not predictable, using rideshare apps at night instead of buses, and she pulls up the laws about pepper spray in our state on her phone. She asks about my sleep and whether I've been having nightmares or trouble concentrating, and when I admit I've barely slept since the attack, she writes that down too. Breaking everything into specific actions I can actually take makes it feel less overwhelming, like I'm building a system instead of just being scared. Jillian never once suggests I'm overreacting or that I should just get over it. She just treats all my concerns as reasonable and worth addressing. About an hour into our meeting, my phone buzzes with a text from Jessica asking if she can join us. I check with Jillian first, and she says of course, so I text Jessica the address. When Jessica walks in 10 minutes later, she comes straight to our table, and before she even sits down, she tells Jillian that she was there that night wearing Julian's hoodie and laughing while I was attacked. She says she feels like she was part of what happened to me, that she made it worse by not taking it seriously, and her voice cracks a little when she talks. Watching her admit all of this out loud to a complete stranger instead of just to me in private makes something shift in how I see her. This isn't just guilt or wanting to feel better about herself. She's actually trying to take responsibility for real. Jillian listens without judgment, and then asks Jessica some questions about what she witnessed, and Jessica shows her the recording she took of Julian dismissing my fear. The three of us sit there for another hour going through everything, and by the end I feel like I have actual support instead of just people saying they're sorry. Over the next few days, my phone keeps lighting up with messages from mutual friends who've apparently heard what happened. Some of them are genuinely supportive and horrified, sending long texts about how they can't believe Julian did that, and asking what they can do to help. But then I get a message from this guy Victor, who's friends with Julian, and he writes that I'm ruining Julian's life by involving the cops over a misunderstanding. He says I'm being dramatic, and that Julian's reputation is getting destroyed because I can't handle conflict like an adult. I read his message 3 times, feeling my anger build. Then I screenshot it and add it to my evidence folder before muting his number. I watch the friend group split in real time as people pick sides, some unfollowing Julian on social media, while others start posting supportive comments on his stuff. It's weird seeing friendships I thought were solid just fracture like this, but I also realize I'd rather know who actually has my back. 3 days later, I'm at work putting boxes on shelves in the stockroom when someone comes around the corner behind me too fast. I don't even think. I just spin around and my chest gets tight and I can't breathe. My vision goes spotty at the edges. It's just my coworker Landon asking where we keep the extra tape, but I'm already having a full panic attack, sliding down to sit on the floor with my head between my knees. Brianna finds me there a few minutes later and sends Landon away. Then she sits down next to me on the concrete floor and just waits until I can breathe normally again. When I can finally talk, I give her a longer version of what happened at the bus stop, including the part about Julian not showing up and the guys going through my purse. Brianna's face goes hard when I tell her about the knife, and she immediately says she's adjusting the schedule so I'm never closing alone anymore. She walks me out to my car after my shift ends and makes sure I'm parked directly under the security lights, then texts me when she gets home to check that I made it back safe. The bank envelope arrives in my mailbox 2 days later, thick and official looking with the bank's logo on the front. Inside is a whole packet of documentation showing that my debit card was used for attempted purchases at Murphy's Liquor on the night of the attack, complete with timestamps showing 9:47 p.m. and 9:52 p.m. and the store's address printed at the top. Both charges were declined because I'd already reported the card as lost, but seeing it all laid out in official bank letterhead makes everything feel horribly concrete. I scan every page and forward the whole thing to Detective Turner's email with a short message explaining the connection to my case. Having this paper trail feels like I'm building something brick by brick, even though I still can't identify the actual faces of the guys who attacked me. The evidence might not be enough to catch them, but at least it proves I'm not making this up or exaggerating what happened. Detective Turner emails me back the next morning asking if I can come to the station for a follow-up interview to collect all the additional evidence I've gathered. She lists out what to bring, including the bank documents, Ahmed's USB drive, screenshots of Julian's messages, and any photos I took of my injuries. I check my work schedule and reply that I can come in on my next day off, which is Thursday. Jessica texts me that afternoon asking how the police stuff is going, and when I tell her about the follow-up interview, she immediately offers to come with me for moral support. The idea of walking into a police station alone makes my stomach hurt, so I accept, and we make plans for her to pick me up Thursday morning. Thursday arrives and Jessica shows up at my apartment at 9:30 with coffee for both of us. We drive to the police station mostly in silence, and I keep going over everything in my head to make sure I don't forget any details. Detective Turner meets us in the lobby and brings us back to a small interview room with a table and chairs that reminds me of every cop show I've ever seen. I spread out all my evidence on the table while Detective Turner pulls out a folder and a recording device, and then I walk her through everything in chronological order. I explain the timeline of my calls to Julian, play the recordings Jessica made, show her the bank fraud documentation, and pull up the photos of my scraped knees and bruised wrist on my phone. When she asks me to describe the attackers, I have to admit I can't identify their faces, because it was dark and everything happened so fast. But I remember their voices and the smell of weed and the way the one guy's hand felt grabbing my hair. Detective Turner nods and takes detailed notes in her folder, never making me feel stupid for not having better descriptions or clearer memories. She explains that the liquor store footage might help even if my memory doesn't, since it can at least confirm that a group matching my description was in that area at the right time using my card. By the time we finish, it's been almost 2 hours and my throat is sore from talking, but I feel like I've done everything I possibly can to document what happened to me. Jessica drives me home from the police station, and we sit in her car outside my apartment for a few minutes just decompressing from the intensity of that interview. My phone buzzes with a message from a number I don't recognize at first, then I realize it's Rylan, Julian's roommate. The text says Julian hasn't slept in days and keeps asking if I'll talk to him, and there's this weird tug in my chest, that old instinct to take care of Julian's feelings and make sure he's okay. But then I remember sitting on that 7-Eleven floor with my knees bleeding while he played beer pong, and the concern just evaporates into irritation that feels almost cleansing. I screenshot Rylan's message and add it to my evidence folder, then I text him back saying I need to get my spare key and a hoodie I left at their apartment, but I'll only meet in a public place during daylight. Rylan responds within minutes, agreeing to a coffee shop near campus, and I appreciate that he doesn't push back or try to convince me to give Julian another chance or hear him out. The next morning, I meet with Jillian at the community center, and she suggests I write a short letter to myself explaining exactly why I'm not meeting Julian privately or going back to his apartment, even if no one else ever reads it. She says it'll help me stay solid in my decision if Julian or his friends try to guilt me or make me doubt myself. I go home and sit at my kitchen table with a notebook and start writing, and 3 pages pour out about how his dismissal made me feel, how I begged him for help while he laughed with Jessica, how I deserve to be believed when I say I'm in danger. Reading it back makes my decision feel concrete instead of emotional, like I'm not just being stubborn or holding a grudge, but actually protecting myself based on clear evidence of how he treated me. Detective Turner calls that afternoon with an update. The liquor store manager agreed to save his security footage, though he warned her that the cameras are older and the quality isn't great. She explains that even blurry footage showing a group of guys matching my description at the right timestamp could help back up my account, and I feel that small spark of hope again. She says she'll follow up once she reviews the footage herself and sees what's usable. I thank her and hang up feeling like the investigation is actually moving forward, instead of just stalling out. At work the next day, I realize I've fallen way behind on a project because I'm barely sleeping and my focus is completely shot. Every time I try to concentrate on the spreadsheet in front of me, my mind drifts back to that bus stop, or I catch myself checking the door every time someone walks in. I finally have to ask Brianna for help catching up, and admitting I can't handle everything on my own feels vulnerable and embarrassing. But Brianna just redistributes some of the tasks to other team members without making it a big deal. And later, when we're alone in the break room, she tells me her couch is available anytime I need it. Then she adds that Julian's behavior that night was fucking inexcusable, honestly. And hearing someone outside the immediate situation name it. So clearly, not as a relationship problem, but as a failure of basic human decency, feels validating in a way I didn't know I needed. Thursday morning, I meet Rylan at the coffee shop, and he shows up with my stuff in a grocery bag, my spare key taped to the top of my folded hoodie. He sits down across from me looking uncomfortable, fidgeting with his coffee cup, and then he admits that he was in the room during my phone calls that night and heard me begging Julian for help on speaker. He says he didn't speak up or tell Julian to leave the game, and he's sorry for that. And I don't really know what to do with his apology except nod and say, okay. Part of me wants to ask why he didn't say anything, why he just sat there while I was screaming about a knife, but I'm too tired to get into it, and his guilt isn't really my problem to manage. Jessica meets me after the key exchange at a different coffee shop, and she's got her phone out before she even sits down. She plays another recording she made later that night after they got back to Julian's place, and I hear his voice complaining to her about me creating drama and making him look bad in front of everyone. He actually says I embarrassed him by calling the cops and making it seem like he didn't care, and listening to him reframe his complete negligence as my fault makes whatever remaining affection I had for him shrivel up completely. Jessica watches my face while the recording plays, and she looks almost sick herself, like she's realizing in real time how deep his denial goes. Detective Turner calls again 2 days later with better news. The liquor store footage shows a group of 4 people matching my description of the teenagers trying to use my card around the time of the attack. She explains this doesn't identify them individually, but it does prove that my account is real, and the attack definitely happened, which matters for the official record. She says some cases like this can get dismissed as he said she said when there's no physical evidence, but now we have bank records, security footage from 2 locations, and witness statements all backing up the same timeline. I thank her probably 3 times before hanging up, and I forward her email to Jessica and Jillian with a short message saying we have proof. That evening, Jillian sends me information about a beginner self-defense class at the community center starting next week, and I sign up immediately without even checking my work schedule first. The idea of learning even basic techniques for breaking grips or creating distance makes me feel slightly less helpless, like I'm building actual skills instead of just managing fear. The class description mentions verbal boundary setting and situational awareness, and I screenshot it to show Brianna at work tomorrow. I spend the rest of the night going through my evidence folder and organizing everything by date. And for the first time since that night at the bus stop, I feel like I'm taking back some control instead of just reacting to things happening to me. The next morning, I draft a post for my social media about safety planning and trusting your gut when something feels wrong. I keep it general, no names or specific details, just practical stuff about having backup plans and not dismissing your own fear. I add a line about how the people who care about you should take your safety seriously, even if they think you're overreacting. I read it 3 times before posting, making sure it sounds helpful rather than bitter. The likes start coming in within minutes. Some people share it, others comment with their own stories about times they ignored red flags or had friends who didn't show up during emergencies. Then I see it. Victor, one of Julian's roommates who was at the beer pong game that night, unfollows me and leaves a comment calling me toxic for subtweeting. I screenshot it immediately. Other mutual friends start picking sides in the comments. Some defend the post as genuinely useful advice. Others leave vague comments about how social media drama is immature. I watch the whole thing unfold like I'm observing a science experiment, noting who likes what and who stays silent. The friendship map becomes crystal clear. People who believe me versus people who think I'm causing problems. People who value safety versus people who value not making waves. I save screenshots of everything and add them to my evidence folder, then I mute the post notifications because watching it in real time makes my chest tight. Late that night, around 2 a.m., I open a new message to Julian and start typing everything I haven't said. I describe the exact sensation of that hand grabbing my hair and yanking my head backward, the sound the knife made when it flicked open, the way my knees felt hitting the pavement when I fell, how I still can't close my eyes without seeing those 4 guys in black hoodies surrounding me. I write about waking up at 3 a.m. every night with my heart racing, checking that my door is locked 3 times before I can even think about sleep. I explain what it felt like to beg him for help while hearing Jessica giggle in the background, to scream about a knife while he called me extra. I type out exactly how it changed something in my brain, made me question every instinct I have because the person who was supposed to protect me told me I was being dramatic when I was actually in danger. The message gets longer and longer, maybe 8 paragraphs, way too long for a text. When I finish writing, I sit there staring at it for 10 minutes. Then I save it to my drafts without sending. He doesn't need to read this. He won't understand it anyway. This message is for me. Proof that I know what happened to my body and mind that night regardless of what he wants to believe. I close the draft and actually sleep for 4 hours straight, which is more than I've managed since the attack. Detective Turner calls 2 days later while I'm at work. I step outside to take it, my stomach already tight with anticipation. She's direct and honest, which I appreciate even though the news isn't great. Unless one of those teenagers gets clearly identified through the security footage or someone comes forward with information, the case will probably move to inactive status. She explains it's not closed, just not actively investigated, and if new evidence surfaces, they can reopen everything. She apologizes for not being able to deliver better news, then gives me contact information for victim services and a counseling center that specializes in trauma. Her tone treats me like someone who experienced real harm, not like someone making a big deal out of nothing. She says my documentation has been thorough and professional, and even if the legal system can't deliver perfect justice, she wants me to know that what happened to me was serious and wrong. I thank her 3 times before hanging up. I forward the victim services information to Jessica and save Detective Turner's final report to my evidence folder. 2 weeks after the bus stop attack, I meet Julian at a cafe to exchange belongings. I picked the place specifically because it's public, well-lit and busy during lunch hours. I get there first and sit at a table near the window where I can see the door. Julian walks in exactly on time carrying a canvas bag with my stuff. He sits down across from me and immediately starts talking about this funny thing that happened at work last week, then mentions a restaurant we used to like. He's trying to pivot into nostalgia, reminding me of good times we had together like that will erase everything else. I let him talk for maybe 30 seconds, watching his face, noting how he smiles like we're just catching up as friends. Then I interrupt him mid-sentence. I tell him clearly that I'm not here to discuss our relationship or reminisce about the past. I'm here to get my things and return his apartment key. His smile falters. He tries to restart the conversation by saying we should at least talk about what happened, that he wants to explain his perspective. I shake my head and pull my phone out of my pocket, setting it on the table between us. Julian shifts in his chair and starts the deflection I knew was coming. He says he didn't realize how serious it was that night. He thought I was safe because I made it to the 7-Eleven. He keeps using phrases like, I didn't understand, and I thought you were okay, like his ignorance absolves him of responsibility. I pick up my phone, pull up the audio file Jessica sent me and play 10 seconds. His voice comes through the speaker clearly, calling me dramatic and extra, saying I make everything a bigger deal than it is. The couple at the next table glances over. Julian's face goes red. He reaches for my phone, but I pull it back. I tell him I won't discuss feelings or forgiveness or anything else until he can acknowledge what he actually said and did that night without deflecting or making excuses. He needs to own his words before we can have any other conversation. Julian's mouth opens to respond, but then Jessica walks over from a table across the cafe where she's been sitting the whole time. I texted her the plan yesterday, and she agreed to come as backup without Julian knowing. She stands next to our table and says quietly but firmly that she's done covering for him, done pretending his behavior that night was okay or understandable. Her voice doesn't shake. She looks directly at Julian and tells him that she was there. She heard everything, and she can't keep acting like it wasn't as bad as it was. A few other people in the cafe are definitely watching now. Julian looks between us, his face cycling through shock and anger and something that might be shame. He tries to argue that the recording is out of context, that I'm being unfair by ambushing him like this. Jessica cuts him off and says the context was that his girlfriend was attacked and he chose beer pong. The silence after she says it feels heavy. Rylan walks in through the cafe door right then, and I realize Julian brought him for moral support the same way I brought Jessica. But Rylan looks uncomfortable as he approaches our table. He sits down in the empty fourth chair and doesn't make eye contact with anyone for a few seconds. Then he speaks up, his voice low. He admits he was in the room that night. He heard my entire phone call on speaker while Julian played beer pong. He heard me begging for help, crying about the knife, screaming that they had my purse. And he didn't say anything to make Julian leave the game. He just stood there and let it happen. His admission hangs in the air, and I feel this wave of grief for the friend group I thought I had. These were people I trusted, people I thought would have my back in a crisis. But when it mattered, when I was literally begging for help on speakerphone, they all just kept playing their game. Rylan's apology doesn't fix anything, but at least he's saying it out loud. I reach into the canvas bag and pull out my hoodie, the gray one I left at Julian's place 3 weeks ago. I fold it and put it in my backpack. Then I take Julian's apartment key off my keyring and slide it across the table to him. I tell him clearly and calmly that I won't be around him anymore. I don't want him contacting me through text, calls, social media, or showing up places I might be. This isn't a conversation or a negotiation. I'm telling him how it's going to be. Then I stand up, put my backpack on, and walk toward the cafe exit without waiting for his response or reaction. Jessica grabs her coffee cup from her table and follows me out. Through the window, I see Rylan still sitting there with Julian, neither of them moving. The symbolic split of who left with whom feels significant. Jessica and I walk 2 blocks in silence before she asks if I'm okay. I tell her I feel lighter than I have in weeks. That night, I have another nightmare about the attack. I'm back at the bus stop and the teenagers are surrounding me again. But this time when I try to run, my legs won't move. I wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding and my sheets soaked with sweat. But my first thought isn't about the nightmare or the fear. It's about how I walked out of that cafe on my own terms. Nobody stopped me or talked me out of my boundaries. Nobody convinced me to give Julian another chance or hear him out or consider his feelings. I set a clear limit and I enforced it, and the world didn't end. The trauma is still there, obviously. I'm still waking up at 3 a.m. terrified. But there's also this new sense underneath the fear that I can trust my own judgment about who deserves access to me. I get up and drink water, check my door locks, and actually manage to fall back asleep by 4 a.m. 3 weeks after I first filed the police report, Detective Turner sends me a final email with an attachment. The liquor store security footage shows a blurry group of 4 people matching the general description of the teenagers who attacked me. They're trying to use a card at the counter around the timestamp when my card was stolen, but the camera quality is too poor to make out faces clearly enough for identification. Detective Turner explains in her email that the case will remain open in the system, but won't be actively investigated unless new evidence surfaces or someone comes forward. She includes the case number and her direct contact information in case anything changes. I read the email twice, then I saved the footage file to my evidence folder. I feel disappointed but not devastated. Part of me wanted those guys to get caught and face consequences. But I'm starting to realize that my healing doesn't actually depend on them getting arrested or the legal system delivering perfect justice. What I needed was for someone in authority to believe me and take it seriously, and Detective Turner did that. The rest is out of my hands. The community center where the self-defense class meets smells like old gym mats and cleaning spray. I show up 15 minutes early and sit on a folding chair against the wall watching other people trickle in. The instructor is a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and muscular arms who introduces herself without any inspirational speech about empowerment or taking back your power. She just says her name is Linda and starts demonstrating a basic wrist release. She grabs her own wrist to show the grip, then twists and pulls in a specific direction that breaks the hold. I practice with a woman next to me who's maybe 60 years old, and we take turns grabbing each other's wrists and breaking free. My hands shake the first few times, but Linda walks over and adjusts my angle, showing me how to use my whole body weight instead of just arm strength. We spend 40 minutes on that one technique. Then Linda teaches us how to create distance by pushing hard at someone's chest or shoulders while yelling "back off" at full volume. The yelling part feels stupid at first, but Linda makes us practice until my voice stops shaking and starts sounding angry instead of scared. She tells us plainly that these techniques won't stop someone determined to hurt us, that real self-defense is mostly about awareness and escape routes, but having any tools at all makes me feel slightly less helpless than I did sitting on that 7-Eleven floor. After class, I text Brianna that I'm done, and she pulls up in her beat-up sedan within 5 minutes. She doesn't ask how it went or if I feel empowered, just hands me a coffee and starts driving toward my apartment. We talk about practical stuff like how I should vary my route home from work, maybe take different streets each night so there's no predictable pattern. Brianna suggests I text her whenever I'm traveling alone at night. Just a quick, leaving now and home safe, so someone knows my timeline. She mentions this app where you can share your location with trusted contacts, and I download it right there in the passenger seat and add her. Her willingness to just help without needing me to be grateful or inspirational or prove I'm healing correctly feels like actual friendship, not the performance kind where someone wants credit for being supportive. When she drops me off, she reminds me to lock my doors, and I do. Then I check my phone and see 3 texts from Jessica. The first one says she officially ended her friendship with Julian yesterday. The second says she wrote me an apology letter weeks ago, but never sent it because she was scared I'd reject it. The third is a photo of the letter, 6 paragraphs handwritten on notebook paper. I sit on my couch and zoom in to read it. Jessica acknowledges that she laughed while I was begging for help, that she called me toxic for yelling at Julian, that she wore his hoodie and leaned into him while I was bleeding and shaking. She writes that she believed his narrative about me being dramatic, because it was easier than admitting her best friend was the kind of person who'd abandon his girlfriend during an attack. Reading it makes my chest feel tight with this complicated mix of appreciation and residual hurt. Her apology doesn't erase what happened or make the memory of her giggling less painful, but it does acknowledge the harm in concrete terms without making excuses. I text back thanking her for the apology and for the concrete help she's given me with recordings and evidence and showing up at the police station. Then I add that we're not going to rehash that night over and over or let Julian become the center of every conversation we have. I tell her if we're building a friendship, it needs to be about more than shared trauma and mutual dislike of my ex-boyfriend. She texts back immediately agreeing and suggesting we get coffee sometime to talk about literally anything else. I feel like we're building something new rather than trying to repair something broken, which seems more honest. The next day, Jillian emails asking if I'd be willing to write a short account of my experience for the campus safety bulletin. Nothing identifying or trauma-focused, just practical information about police response times and safe spaces. I spend 2 hours writing 3 paragraphs about how 911 put me on hold for 8 minutes, how the 7-Eleven clerk helped me without hesitation, how having a plan for where to run made the difference between getting away and not getting away. Jillian edits it to remove any details that might identify me, and we frame it as useful information rather than a personal story. Seeing my experience turned into something that might help someone else recognize a safe business or know to have backup plans feels purposeful in a way that's separate from my own healing. 3 days later, I need to take the bus during daylight hours to get to an appointment across town. My heart starts racing the second I sit down at the stop, and when a group of 4 teenagers boards at the next stop, I feel my breathing go shallow and fast. They're just regular kids with backpacks talking about some video game, nothing threatening, but my body doesn't care about logic. I pull out my phone and text Brianna that I'm on the bus and feeling anxious. She texts back immediately with a reminder to breathe in for 4 counts and out for 6 counts, and I focus on that pattern while the teenagers sit in the back laughing about something. The anxiety doesn't disappear, but I manage it. And when I get off at my stop, I feel proud of myself for not letting fear completely control my choices about where I can go. That evening, Detective Turner sends a final email explaining that the case will remain open in the system, but won't be actively investigated unless new evidence surfaces or someone comes forward with information. She includes the case number and her direct contact in case anything changes. I save the email and all the attached documents in a folder on my laptop labeled Bus Stop Incident, and feel this sense of closure about the legal side, even though it's not the justice-served ending I might have wanted a month ago. Those guys probably won't get caught or face consequences, and I've had to accept that my healing doesn't actually depend on the legal system delivering perfect results. 5 weeks after the attack, I'm waiting at a different bus stop during daylight to meet Jessica for coffee. The sun is bright and there are other people around, and I chose this location specifically because it's well lit and busy. When I adjust my backpack strap, I notice my hands aren't shaking. I still have bad nights where I wake up at 3 a.m. seeing that knife or feeling that hand in my hair. I still get anxious on public transportation, and I still check my locks 3 times before bed. But I also have Brianna's number saved as an emergency contact, and I know basic wrist releases, and I can write about my experience without falling apart. I have clearer boundaries about who gets access to me and what behavior I'll accept from people who claim to care about me. And I have this quiet confidence that I can trust myself to recognize danger and ask for help from people who will actually show up instead of playing beer pong while I beg them to care. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Nothing polished, just how it happened. Thanks for hanging out. It always feels like catching up with a buddy. We'll do it again next time.